It's Saturday, November 26th, 2022. I'm in this at the moment. I watched Yellowstone, the first season, a while ago. The cinematography, it's so artistically, it's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful landscape, which is why I'm sure that they chose it. Places I've never been. But symbolically, I'm watching season 5. I skipped the seasons in between. Um, I'm learning a lot in kind of, sort of, but not really kind of way. Um, Symbolically, I'm looking, of course, because the chosen symbol that they display on the black and white barn. Um, the fact of my real life experience with some extremely special trip once upon a time. I thought one person was arriving for a special birthday. It was someone else. It was the only time some of the country club kids got together with me. There was a special guest that was in town, or at least drove up in one of those big black SUVs, unmarked. I did not know who it was that was arriving. My memory is not that clear and sharp at the moment for details, but whatever. I know for sure it was Dances with Wolves. I know for sure it was Kevin Costner was up on the screen. I know for sure it was a woman in the tribe, and then it was the soldier who wore a uniform on the screen. Kevin Costner playing the leading role on that. And now, years later, there's this reference on the screen of a man from Montana. He's now the governor of Montana. And he's angry with New York and California. Big evil New York and California. I see very real symbolism with what's going on in my metro psychology of New York at the moment, or at least what's portrayed or displayed. I'm learning through the portrayal of this most prominent and important figure, not to discredit anybody else that's ever won an award with an academy or with whatever. I wasn't invited into that level of artistry. I wasn't introduced to your followings. I wasn't invited to premieres and Academy Awards. I don't know why, but I do see and hear now in the quiet some tie-ins. One being on season 5, episode 1. It says Dutton Overland. And there's a speech that he gives about not wanting to be governor, but that's why he's pretty sure that what they had in common is why they chose him. Then there's this mention of wolves, actually, the way I described it to Tia Frio, because he was passing through the room, and it just, I'm like, I'm really not on speaking terms with him, but cordial, whatever. So the men were tasked with these wolves that were eating cattle, and the owner said to them that they're being disruptive and so on and so forth. And then the men who were tasked with whatever the wolf removal to protect the herd of cattle um, did whatever they did, and then go down to find the wolves with collars on and tracking collars. And the one got really, really upset. And he's just like, you don't understand. He's like, these wolves now have Facebook pages. They have people with t-shirts that know that they're here and follow them. And it makes things really difficult. In my quietness of thinking of what that could, and chasing that so many ways of what that might mean in a nano fight, a micro fight, a macro fight of circles. I was just like, that's interesting. Then it goes on to show a man who works in construction that was hired to spray, but the water was getting polluted, the fish were dying, and this man's cattle were dying. And in the storyline of season 5, episode 1, so the man whose cattle, again a different man, but his cattle were dying and the fish were dying and the water was being polluted, comes up and is really upset with the man from the EPA, or the man who's spraying, who says he has a license with the EPA. And the man says, he's like, no, he's like, it's toxic. Fight ensues, and the man says something that really caught my ear. He tied the EPA with the telephone company, and I'm like, whoa, what? Because I use the telephone company as a hypothetical between the mobile problem and why are all my carriers gone? I used to have neat and tidy and rules on a telephone bill that gave me some sense of false security in New York, that there were layers of security. Like there's the local phone number security, there's the regional phone calling security, there's the long distance phone calling security, and then should one really be high on the horse, there might be an international call every now and again if they know people. But it's easy to know who's in the area based on these, without like getting into like craziness of Pegasus and whatever. Just as a simple, like Valley girl, just checking on her own security. Like, all right, I haven't seen the man in the unmarked vehicle for many, many years. I don't know how to get a hold of him. We've grown up now. I have no idea where he got in the world. I know where I've been in a series of rooms. But what I do notice when I take inventory is the phone company no longer looks like the phone company of my youth. And those layers of security, as trivial as they might seem on a paper document when it comes in the mail once a month and not via some email, because whatever, um, gave some kind of concrete reality that there were layers of security to this management job, to this area of dragnet that runs Metro City, knowing there's always this like mega mind somewhere, and then there's Metro City guy, and their alter egos, but like somehow they need each other in order to balance out the powers of good and evil, and some way of explaining in silly talk, but it really does hold weight at some point in analysis, anyhow. Um, so it really frightened me. The man said, he mentioned the telephone company and the EPA, and I'm like, when did the EPA become part of the telephone company? I was like, again, then they got all crazy scary with lawsuits and eminent domain and all this other stuff in their whatever they're up to. I mean, and they're threatening to sue one another for, he wants to shut down this airport and leisure thing, and then they're throwing out there all the tax revenue and like all this private equity stuff, and I'm like, it's been a while. So I try to listen to their words and their version of English. I have to rewind it. I'm not down at taking notes because, again, and then at some point they mention a public briefing. And I'm like, oh, no, I never thought of the television as such or as the possibility of Hollywood as such. And they seem to have oversaturated and torn apart their own way of doing things. So that's interesting. So I'm just attaching symbolism where I find it's most potent and where it has real tie-in for real national security and then global security concerns that I have, and not knowing where the person who was my age at one point or looked to be about my age, who came for a visit unannounced, well received but unannounced, and spent time in the field with us in our little enclave or township. I mean, we were in 11743 at AMC movie theater. It still exists. I've been back, I've looked, I've checked. I haven't gone in though. Haven't been there in a long time. So all of these things are now kind of just coming to some kind of a, I don't know. But I thought that the meaningful pieces being the character and who they chose. And again, there's multiple paradox. I know sometimes people see who they want to see inside the characters. I get that. I have a bit of myself in that way of receiving some of the information. In real world update, fourth decade, back in Queens, no longer safe in the town where the movie theater was. I today have some form of fever that went on out of nowhere. Had it last week, went away, came back, checked. It's not COVID. Could be a plethora of things in microbiological terms. my studies here. I got an updated list right before COVID and the shutdown and the pandemic. Um, but I'm not clear where to go for specialized testing on what it might be in some ongoing thing, especially with the almost, I mean, for lack of a better term, industrious ammonia, which does not smell healthy. I don't, again, I go back to this mention on the television with this briefing of sorts about the EPA, the telephone company, and whatnot. I'm here. I don't know how to protect myself. I don't have access to law groups. I don't know where the person from the vehicle went, how to contact anyone related to him. I wouldn't have any idea. Um, but health being, and then I'm thinking to myself, when living with my son Benjamin and what he had access to at school, if somebody was concerned, if and only if somebody was concerned about my health, safety, and well being while in this, whatever that I was all shelled up about, um, and not quite knowing how to ever just. I mean, I went to Landmark in front of a room full of people. He disappeared for the entire weekend. I was beside myself checking for the hospitals. Um, but there was that conversation about human trafficking that went on there. I did not forget about it. Um, Also did not know how to like handle that conversation either. But I was there in Manhattan with a whole group of strangers, and it really went on. And he really is the um, same person that went to Canada. That I don't know. So anyway, so if somebody had cared to ask my son Benjamin to check in on me for microdosing of, is this a long-term project of internal problems with some form of poison and some form of um, like high ammonia. My son Benjamin would have been able to confirm that if whatever is frowned upon and whatever, just for keeping tabs on someone in a whatever. Somebody cares and looks out, I would hope. Um, and by microdosing, I mean there's something going on either in the combustible engines and breathable that's changing biochemistry. I'm not talking about late in the game, whatever that went on with other problems. Pretty much at Ronkonkoma is where that file ends and is no longer talked about once Maple and so on and so forth, because it should have never left Ronkonkoma. Um, so it was a gauge of how's mom's health doing with kidney function and whatnot. Since I wasn't following it myself, doctors were not helpful, and I was going in and out of being anemic, but nobody was really explaining the hypervolemic part, or if it was a simple iron deficiency. Nobody was talking infusions. Um, it's access to almost like false security, it feels like, with going to a doctor and having some form of blood test run. Um, and also being given like these weird, like, thyroid medication when clearly one doesn't need thyroid medication necessarily. Um, So many years. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza, it's Earth, solar system, Milky Way, universe, galaxy is broken. And it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361. The lawsuit part, I don't really still get. I don't understand it. I don't really understand how they do law here. I don't know. I mean, like, between the corporate lawyers, corporate loss, corporate securities, private equities, and then that whole state and what I really would need someone who's versed in this. I'm watching the public displays of some form of communication. I'm trying to follow along best I can. But I've got some kind of quantum entanglement that I can't seem to shed or get rid of. It's not fair. And it's really uncomfortable because it's just decades just wasted, decade after decade after decade of just wasting time, wasting a biological clock, and wasting time that, I mean, it's just not right.